We are clearly at our kitchen table with a very special guest that we're going to introduce here. Most of you know, or many of you know that have been with us from the beginning, that we started our podcast at our kitchen table, always saying that we'd be sharing a seat for you. And we recorded our dinner time conversations. That's actually the origin story of Hidden True Crime. And so when we have a very special guest, we oftentimes invite them to sit with us at our kitchen table. We did that, for example, with Heather Daybell, with Kate and Larry Woodcock. And today is no exception. We are doing this now with the Scott Mitchell. Scott is a former NFL quarterback. You played for 12 years?
12 years in the NFL, yes.
What teams?
I was drafted by the Miami Dolphins. Then I went to the Detroit Lions, Baltimore Ravens, and Cincinnati Bengals.
Wow. So quite the career, in other words. And he also is currently a podcast host. What is your podcast?
So I like to call it a streaming sports radio show. It's called The Down and Dirty with Scott Mitchell. So we cover sports from people who know, and we're going to give you the real insight, the down and dirty to really all the sports that you care about. There's a few sports out there that a lot of people like, I don't like, and so we're not going to talk about them.
Well, what about the Olympics?
You know, the Olympics, I love the Olympics. And I really do. I get really patriotic. I think a lot of people might argue that this year's Olympics was by far the best Olympics. Certainly look, all we care about is the medal count, right? And we just want to we get more gold medals in China. That's all we want, right? We want that. And we want to win. I think we want to win swimming too. And then there's the other sports that you're supposed to win, like basketball. And so it's almost like, yeah, okay, we're supposed to win that. I'm intrigued by golf. I like golf. I like golf in the Olympics. The other thing that's really exciting, and so I live in Utah. I live in Salt Lake City, and sports in Utah just grew up. Like we now have the NHL hockey. We've got the NBA and the Winter Olympics, and they were great in 2002, and now they're coming back in 2034, and that is just massively exciting. They're still trying to get baseball, Major League Baseball in Salt Lake. So I love sports. Sports has been an incredible part of my life. Like it's really like I can't get away from it, and I don't want to get away from it. You know, so it's really been a tremendous thing. So it's fun to talk about for me. It's fun to share my insight and everything that I've felt and learned and experienced, and it's really, really. I wish we could spend, because I know you want to talk about sports, and I want to talk about sports, because let's face it, Chad Daybell is not a sport, and so
there's a foreshadowing right there. Put a pin in that.
Yeah. So I love sports, I love to share it, and that's what I do.
Yeah. No. And John, a lover of sports too. You guys both. John played football. You were never an NFL quarterback.
No,
but
it wasn't.
It's okay. I love you for your brain.
I enjoyed sports. I love sports. I'm still a sports fan, so I'm looking forward to listening to your show.
Good. Yeah, please tune in.
Many of our guests might be wondering right now, oh, are you guys starting a sports podcast with Scott? How does Scott fit into true crime? So here's a little teaser for all of you, because get ready for a fascinating interview, everyone. You also might recognize Scott from, I'll say, The Biggest Loser. You were on The Biggest Loser back when The Biggest Loser reality. What year was that?
I was season 16.
Season 16.
Wasn't trying to be on the show, and I loved it. And it was a powerful time for me. There were some cool things that happened that weren't even a part of the show. Unfortunately for me, I wasn't big enough to be the biggest loser. So I couldn't even lose you can't even lose The Biggest Loser. Like, you must be a really big loser if you can't lose The Biggest Loser, kind of thing. That's, I say a little tongue in cheek. Great time. A lot of amazing people, amazing experiences. It was a wonderful thing.
He wrote a lot about, this is his book. I just want to show that he wrote a lot about being on The Biggest Loser in this book, and let me tell you who this book is published by. Let's just let people know.
Please don't.
Oh, I'm gonna let him know. He portaled here today. So Spring Creek Book Company is the publisher of your
Yes.
book. In other words, Chad Daybell's publisher. And when you refer to growing up in a small town, you're referring to Springville, Utah.
Yes.
And you also, I'm going to have to say it, you thank Chad Daybell in the foreword of this book. Thank you to Chad Daybell and the staff of Spring Creek Book Company for their hard work. So there you go, everybody.
Oh, well, yeah. The awkward, what is it? A pregnant pause, the awkward silence there after you make that. Look, now it's extremely embarrassing, to have been associated with Chad. I cringe about it all the time, kind of. I mean, it's, I never, in the moment when Chad was writing a book, when he spent 2.5 months in my house, when his wife Tammy was sitting there every day, she was on a computer and she was typing all of the, editing stuff and making corrections. And I never thought in a million years that she would be dead. It would be because of him, and that he, murdered 2 other children. And I mean, so how am I supposed to? No one's going to know that.
No.
But now it's embarrassing. Now it's just cringeworthy. I just hate it. There's nothing that he did, nothing that would lead me to believe, oh yeah, this guy's is it a mass murder when it's multiple people? I mean, what is the actual term of a person? I mean, I want to get my
Terms right.
I think just referring to him as a murderer
as
probably gets the job
will
done.
cover everything.
Yeah.
It's
Technically, the definition would be
Serial killer for him, though. It's not a mass murder in this situation. It's a serial killer, right?
a serial killer would be when you kill people over a period of time. A mass murder typically would
be someone like at one point.
It would be like Stephen Paddock at the Mandalay Bay at the concert.
Right.
They killed a number of people at the same time.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can think of a lot of other people I grew up with that I'd say before Chad, but
you're not going to mention any names.
No,
I take it.
No. Yeah, it's just really embarrassing. And for me, writing a book was just something that I'd felt and wanted to do for a long time. And it's fun to share the moments of my life. I think some of them are interesting and unique and whatever. And so having that experience, but I can tell you when we were doing the book that there was this conflict that we had, and that he was trying to paint me and my life in a picture that was perfect. And it was like, and I go, look, my life has not been perfect. And I don't want people to think that it's been perfect. I've had some very embarrassing things happen, disappointing things happen. There's things, boy, I wish I'd have done that different. I'm not, I could have been better in a lot of situations. And so he wanted it to be, well, you got to know your audience, and your audience is an LDS audience. And I go, no, look, no, my audience is people. I don't want to paint this false fake. I don't think LDS people would appreciate that. And I'm very LDS. Like, quite frankly, a lot of why I've even spoken in the past and everything is because Chad Daybell does not represent what being an LDS person is to me. And it was embarrassing. It was, humiliating. It was just like, how could you portray something that's it's such a good story, such a good message, for me personally, has brought so much hope and peace, and you've just dismantled that in such a horrible way. And for a guy who wanted to create this image of looking like a good guy, he certainly blew it in a big way and just damaged so many things. I mean, I think of Heather Daybell, who you've had on, and I don't know Heather. I mean, she was younger than I was, grew up in Springville. And for that to kind of be part of what shook her faith, that's sad to me, that it can have that much damage on people, because my faith teaches me so many different things. It teaches about hope, and it teaches about, Christ said, I didn't come here to condemn you. I came here to redeem you. So he's not, it's not about killing people. It's about helping people. It's just really sad that someone got so far out of bounds and so far. I mean, I just try to rack my brain about Chad. Like where did you go off the rail? Like at what point? And then at what point did you keep going further off the rails? At what point did you get where you decided to murder people? Like I can't, I mean, in my most hated people that I know in the world, I've never imagined ever killing them. I can't wrap my brain around that.
When you and I spoke on the phone for the first time, you said something actually that I won't forget. You said, since this has happened, since Chad Daybell was in the news, there isn't a day that's gone by that you haven't thought about this. Is that true?
It's really true. And it's not like I'm trying to think about it. Like I don't spend I'm busy. I got a lot of life. I'm living like I've got a good life, got a great life, wonderful, wonderful life. And so I don't consciously go, all right, let's talk about Chad Daybell today. But it comes up.
Yeah.
It comes up at the most odd moments. And there is one reoccurring theme that always comes up for me. So I'll be anywhere, it doesn't matter what I'm doing. And I'll be, okay, this whole entire day that I've been out having fun, working, not working, sitting it doesn't matter. I'm free. I'm free. I can go do whatever I want. I can go do nothing, and yet I'm still free. And this whole time, just today, but every day, I'm free and he's not, and he never will be again. And that's just really stuck with me. And how much time has passed since he was arrested on the day when they found the children in his backyard. And he's never been free since that day. And I think of all the days and all the moments and the years that have gone by since then, and all the life that I've lived and the wonderful things that I've experienced. And it's been great. And he's in jail. It's just been one of the really powerful, stark messages or moments or impacts from this. And I don't forget it. And I do it crosses my mind often.
You had mentioned that you were just thinking about something about Chad Daybell the other day. Was it about that issue, or was it something different?
There's always stuff that pops up. Like one of the things in his trial that I haven't, because I listen to you guys. You guys are amazing. Love what you do. And because I paid attention to the trial because of course. And it was when Chad's mom testified, and it wasn't dramatic. She didn't say, and no one said, "Oh, well, that was, boy, she dropped a bombshell there." That was, but it's that she testified, and it just hit me one day. It was like, because moms are moms. Yeah. Moms love their kids, right? And they love them in a way nobody else does. And to have your mom essentially testify for the prosecution, and it wasn't earth-shattering what she said, but she testified to tell the truth. And I think in some way, and this is my own opinion, I haven't talked to Chad's mom. I think it was her way of saying, it's the truth is important, and we got to get to the truth. And, and that's what I would want to say to Chad. Like, I've thought a lot about actually going and seeing him, trying to get a hold of him, whether it was calling him on the phone or literally going to see him and just say, look, can we have a real conversation? Like, don't give me the BS. Don't give me your spiel. Don't give me all that stuff. Look me in the eye and tell me what you're doing is true and right and good. And it's not. So quit it. Yeah. Give up the facade, knock it off. And I think it was in some way his mom. The truth is really important here. And I think it was his mom's way of maybe saying it a little bit to him. Chad, own up to this. And just be a man about it and make it right.
Right. It was her saying, "Wake up."
Yeah.
Yeah,
1000%.
Another thing you shared with me on the phone, and honestly, I think this entire interview is going to cover this. It's not going to be one answer, but you said you're still just trying to figure it out. Like, as you say, you would have never thought Chad Daybell would be the guy that is sitting behind bars and for the reason.
So when you grow up in a small town, and I loved it. I loved growing up where I grew up. It was unbelievable. Like there was no sense of crime at all. You went to the grocery store and you didn't lock your door. I mean, you probably leave your car open with the window open, and and if someone came by and took your car, it's probably because they needed a ride. And you just get there was never, murder was never. I mean, nothing. And we just roamed the streets. Just come home when it's dark, and all that stuff. And it was wonderful. It was just truly remarkable. So it's really hard to wrap your brain around someone that you grew up with in a small town getting to like where he got to. Like for me, I can't wrap my brain around, that I knew someone, or that he was, someone who I I have so many connections that I didn't realize I had with Chad. And in fact, I was thinking of one driving here today. I remember because he talked in his book, right? And I wanted to figure out, where does this guy come from? How did he get to this point? Where do you do this? And he talked about being really good at sports when he was first starting out in baseball. And he talks about hitting like home runs and all of this stuff. And I remember reading, because I read this book.
Mhm.
As have we.
Just to understand, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people are like, why would you even read any? Like, I'm trying to understand because that's why I'm here, quite frankly, John, is you got to help me understand who this guy is, because I don't know. But
did you play sports with Chad Daybell?
Well, so he talked about how great he was at baseball his first year. And I'm like, I don't remember that. But driving here today, I actually remember him being really good at baseball. And that was an accurate thing. And when I say this was like our first year of organized baseball.
Okay.
Like for me, I was terrible when I first started playing baseball. I was horrible.
This is beyond T-ball. And
It was the first year after T-ball. So it's your first year where like the players actually threw, we never had coach pitch. We had player pitch.
Okay.
And he was, I remember now, I can see him running around the bases and going, this kid, and then after that, it was like, we all just went right by Chad as far as, so he was never in sports. I think I have a picture of Little League.
Are you in either of those photos?
So I have no. Oh. Man, look at that hair though. Is that, there's Chad right there. Look at that.
So just to clarify,
right there.
just to clear, I just want to,
I have
for the
picture.
record here, you're saying there was a moment, there was maybe a year or so when Chad Daybell was actually a better athlete than Scott Mitchell.
That would be an accurate assumption.
That alone is going to stun people.
Yeah, and so that was a tough time for me.
And while this, as you say, it's embarrassing that you knew, not only did you know him, but then as adults, you said, yeah, you know what, Chad, help me write my book, which this is Chad's book, not your book. So, grab it. And I want to say this, we both read your book. It's quite good. And so I have questions now too, because as someone that's read a lot of Chad Daybell's books,
right,
unfortunately, and John and I have spent a lot of time kind of mocking sort of how bad they are, honestly. And I liked your book. I actually read your book, and John liked it too, and it was quite good. And I have like a lot of questions too, like why did he not promote your book more? I don't know. We'll get into that. There is so much to just, I guess, unpack here. I want to let people know. Um, but your book is really good, and it's actually inspiring. And did Chad write it then, or did you write it, or did he?
So in his book, so his book, he talks about an experience he had with me.
He does.
And that was really creepy to me, by the way, because it's not the truth. What he told in his book is actually not. I know it's a shock to people that it's actually not the truth, but it wasn't how things actually happened.
We learned about you back in early 2020 by reading Chad Daybell's book.
Yeah. And and I have some theories as to why I was in his book. But to get back to your question about my book and how it's different. Chad didn't write my book. I actually wrote my book. It's actually from my own words, my own mouth. I did it in a unique way. Sat down with a court reporter. It was my idea to do that. It wasn't Chad's. And so literally, that's a little foreshadowing, right? To Chad to be around court reporters typing. I just realized that. I didn't even think about that till this very moment.
There's more foreshadowing in your book about the mortician story, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah. Oh, that's
right. Did you ever think about that?
I could have either been a garbage man or a mortician.
Yeah.
Which was mortifying to me, by the way. It's like that's what I have to look forward to.
I know. Well, that's like when you apparently decided, you told the guidance counselor, no, I'm going to be a professional football player.
But then Chad Daybell, essentially, he didn't become a mortician, but he worked in a graveyard. Let me just read so this is Chad Daybell's autobiography, Living on the Edge of Heaven, Spring Creek Book Company. The irony is, it was published shortly after yours, and then he spent a lot more time promoting his book than your book, which I find interesting as well. We'll get into that. But this is what he says. So you tell us that what isn't accurate about this. Interesting dreams about Scott Mitchell, which, can I just say, that's like a little weird. That's already, that had to give you pause too.
Yeah. I don't dream about me.
You probably don't have interesting dreams about Chad Daybell though either. And if you
never had a dream about Chad. No.
So interesting dreams about Scott Mitchell. As I explained earlier, so I skipped something. Did I skip one part of him? As he explained earlier, NFL quarterback Scott Mitchell and I were friends growing up. Not buddies who hung out together, but definitely friends. He and I were often on the same basketball and baseball teams, and his dad, Bill, was usually our coach. I had closely followed Scott's football career. So there you go. He was following you intensely in your football career. He went on to excel at the University of Utah, setting several NCAA passing records. The Miami Dolphins then drafted him in 1990, and he spent 3 years as Dan Marino's backup. I assume that much is true. When Dan suffered a season...
can I just stop for one second?
Yeah, stop.
Because it kind of grates on me. We weren't friends growing up.
Okay.
We were acquaintances. It wasn't like I had friends. I can tell you their names. I would go to their houses to play. We would go play in the park. We would hang out together. I'd go to their house. They would come to my house. Those were my friends. Never, ever one time did it happen that I was his friend. And that now, were we on sports teams together? Yeah. And there's probably other kids that were on those same sports teams that were not my friends. We were teammates for a period of time, but an acquaintance because we went to school together, but we were not friends.
Now, as I reread that back.
Okay, so the rest of it's true. But that part is not. And it's weird because this bugs me. Like it really does. Like the whole thing really bugs me.
No, he's a serial killer now. It bugged me too. The way he clarifies it. We were friends growing up. Well, and then he explains, well, not buddies who actually hung out together.
Right.
But we were definitely friends. But then he gives no context.
We're definitely not friends.
And the fact that you were not buddies who hung out together kind of shows us all that, I guess. Yeah. Thoughts, Dr. J, or should I just keep going?
Keep going. I think the more interesting part is When he talks about the dream.
Okay, we'll keep going.
I have a theory about why this was in here. Can I just
Please,
share it
go
right
ahead.
now? I moved away from Utah, moved back to Utah, and I've run into people that I played football against in high school. And most of them say, yeah, I picked you off in high school. I got an interception off of you. And it's like, if all the people that I ran up to who told me they intercepted me in high school, like how would I ever get recruited to play? Like, and there's this using another person's status to establish credibility for yourself when you don't have any credibility. And that's what this really felt like to me as I read this, because that book came out after in the book that Chad published for me. And by the way, Chad published the book. I'm like, okay, well, how are we going to promote this? You were asking those questions. And he goes, we had this strategy and it was working. It was fun. And really all we did, we went to Costco. They ordered 200 books and I'd sit there on a Saturday. People come in and they buy the books. And it was fun. I didn't really write the book to make money off of it. I really wrote it because I just had this inside of me. I just wanted to put it on paper and get it out there. That was more of the reason. And then we were not long into this, and Chad just goes, yeah, I'm shutting down my publishing company and I'm moving to Idaho. And I never talked to Chad again ever after that moment. And so then all this stuff comes out, and like Chad's been accused of all these things. And I'm like, what's going on in Chad's world? And I heard, I watched a Dateline, and Keith Morrison said, all you need to know about Chad Daybell is in the edge of heaven. I'm like, what's the edge of heaven? Like, and so that's when I got the book and I started reading his book going, well, he didn't shut his publishing company down because he just published a book about himself. And then I started reading all this stuff about the dreams he had and about and I'm like, I'm in a book that Chad Daybell wrote, and like he never even talked to me about being in his book. And I was like, and so that's when I started to put together, okay, this is who Chad is. Like he has no credibility, and in his soul he knows that. But he can kind of fool the people by telling, well, hey, I grew up with a guy who played in the NFL. Who not many people can say that, right? And so, wow, you must be very important. You must, and you were buddies, you were friends, you were whatever. And people are going to pay attention to you more. They're going to give you some level of respect that maybe you couldn't get otherwise.
It's called name dropping.
Right.
Social status.
Social proof. John, you've actually talked a lot about that when it comes to Chad Daybell, that he did like the who's who and the name dropping. And I think you nailed it with status. Anything you want to add to that? Because it is true. I see this as, when I read it the first time and I had never talked to you, I saw it as a name drop too, as a status, and I think looking back, I think I did giggle when he said, we were not buddies. We didn't hang out, but we were definitely like quantifying your friendship or your not friendship.
There were 288 students that graduated in my class. A lot of them I went to school with from elementary school, kindergarten, all the way through high school. Everyone. It's not like we had 1,500 people in our graduating class. We knew each other. And when you live in a small town, you all do all the things. You go to church together, you play sports together. Everyone associates with everyone, but you're not necessarily friends with everyone. I had my group of friends. I'm still friends with them today. And they're not Chad, never were.
Yeah, I think there's no question that he wanted some measure of fame. It might have been fame within the LDS community, but it was still fame. So we know from talking to a source very close to Chad that he wanted that he saw himself as special. He was writing these books, which were getting some attention. So I think that's part of it too. I think he felt like he was maybe not like a super well-known author, but he was an author and he was somewhat well-known. And maybe given your status of being an NFL player, he saw those two as connected.
Don't you think, like, when you say I'm an author, like that's to me sounds like it has status, like I would have respect for someone. I mean, I wrote a book, right? But I don't go around going, yeah, I'm an author too. I actually don't ever promote the book. I rarely talk about it. It's my life. There's some stories in there that happened in my life that mean a lot to me. But Chad got a perfect score on his ACT. Like, I would say Chad would be successful in his life. He was a great student. He was on the student council in high school. I would say he was a person that probably would have done something significant in his life. The class that I went to, it was a really good class. I mean, we had some people that, we had doctors and a lot of successful people. Really, we won state championships in sports. Our swimming team was really good. Our band played at Ronald Reagan's inauguration, and it was just across the board. Our whole class was pretty unique and special. And so I would have looked at Chad, more so to be a person that probably would have gone on in his life and done very well in whatever he did. I would never have seen him as a person that would, be where he is now. I just wouldn't. I would have seen it a way different way.
Yeah, that's one of the things we talk about a lot is, did Chad Daybell break bad? Was he fundamentally this guy that was good and wanted to do good and just went down the wrong path at some point?
So I have a theory.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
I really do have a theory.
Okay.
Because I really do think about this. I don't want to. I don't think about it, but I do. And one of the things is, it feels like to me, this whole idea of, okay, I want to do something special in my life. Mm-hmm. But I think he realized in talking to people that he could convince people of a narrative. And the narrative, like, because his novels, they're fiction, right?
Yeah.
But they were based on factual events. Mm-hmm. And there were other LDS authors, that work in the glory, and so it's a novel based on real events, which I actually kind of like those types of books. It's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of interesting to me. And I think he was at first kind of modeling this or copying it or whatever. And then I think there got to a point where he goes, I'm not sure where fantasy, fiction, and reality switch, because I can name drop. I think he did it when you mentioned about LDS leaders.
Yeah.
And I think he name dropped those, quoting apostles and prophets and all kinds of things, and using kind of a half truth to kind of perpetuate his lie. But I think there came a point when he realized, I can lie to people and they'll believe it as being true. And I really think there was a point that he got, I don't know whether it was confused, I don't know whether it was on purpose, but I think he realized, I can really fool a lot of people into believing some pretty crazy stuff. And I think he said it so much, I think he started to believe it to himself, where he just lost that line of what is real and what is fiction. And he had a narrative that fit him, and trying to, get to some result. Like, I think with Lori, he's like, I finally had a cute girl that paid attention to me, and I'm going to say whatever I can, so she's going to be with me. And to the point of, well, my wife's going to die early because I can't divorce my wife because I'm a good LDS guy, and that would look bad.
Right.
And so he can create this narrative of telling half truths and spinning things so much and so often, to the point where he just goes, it becomes his truth. It becomes his reality.
There's a term for that in psychology. It's called the sleeper effect. Where if you tell a lie often enough, and even though if you know it's a lie or it's fiction, if you do it over and over and people are believing it or seem to be believing it, then sometimes you start believing it.
And I question myself, like, am I buying my own BS? And I seriously, I seriously asked myself, because I don't want to end up getting to the end of my life and going, you were so clueless about reality. Like, dude, you are so far off the rails. And I don't want to get that way. And because I can spin a tale, like I can tell a story, and I can, I can sell things to people, but I really, really try to be true and authentic and real in my assessment of me and where I am and how things are. And part of it is because of what I've seen with Chad.
Well, you didn't come in here and tell us right away that you were drafted by the Miami Dolphins and instantly you beat out Dan Marino for starting quarterback. So
No, Chad Daybell told us that.
I didn't have the feeling that you weren't being truthful.
Well, so
or maybe you did.
Okay, so there's a lot there, because when I was done playing football, it was almost like it was all, I don't know if it's embarrassment to say it, like I just or you felt like you were bragging about. So I just very rarely talked about, unless someone was interested. If someone wanted to know what I did or who I was, then I'd share information. But I certainly haven't gone out and led with, I'm not wearing my jersey or, paraphernalia from when I played. Because I, as great as professional sports was, it is an incredible experience. I just feel like there's so much more to me as a person.
Yeah.
And if I'm just defined by that I played professional football, that would be kind of limiting. And
right.
I think there's just more to what I love in life and who I am than just that. So
and that comes across in your book, by the way. So I don't think we said the title, but the book is Alive Again. And both Lauren and I both read this, and I was really quite moved by it. So and it does come across that you're not one dimensional in your book. So
yeah, and oh boy, I had this really interesting relationship with my dad. My dad did so many great things for me in my life, and Chad mentions my dad in his book
as a coach,
and my dad was a coach, and I hated it. I hated that my dad was one of our coaches because it's, and my friends love my dad. They were like, he's our favorite coach of all time. I've had so many of them. If your dad had not helped us coach, we would have never won a state championship in football. And I was like, and I hated that my dad was my coach at that time. And I've coached my kids in sports and had wonderful experiences with my kids, but I was mad at my dad at the time. And so, my dad went through this process of dying slowly, and it was because of being overweight. And I watched it, and I watched him for a period of 6 years just have horrendous things happen to his physical body. And I was with him when he was about to die, and we were in the hospital, and they're like, he probably has 20 minutes, maybe a couple of hours. So I'm sitting with my dad knowing he's going to die at any time, and I'm going to say goodbye. And I don't know what to say, because I thought that this wasn't going to happen, and I thought he was going to get better, and he didn't, and I didn't really understand. And how do you say goodbye? Like, that you only get one shot at this. And I'd made my amends with my dad, and we were really close when he did die. And we were in this room, and this nurse shut the door to the room to give us some privacy, and a picture of a butterfly appeared. And I just said, Dad, you're like an old, worn out caterpillar right now. And your body's ravaged, and it's going to go into a cocoon. And someday you're going to come back again, and you're going to be this beautiful butterfly. And it just gave me this peace with my dad dying, knowing it wasn't forever. And from my faith, I know that he'll live again, and he'll be whole. And shortly after that, I went on The Biggest Loser, and I was like my first day on the show. And I'm being interviewed like we're being interviewed right here. They set up all the cameras, look just like this. And as they start the interview, how do you feel about being overweight? And how do you feel about being fat? And how do you feel about being on TV? And how do you, so we're starting this interview and a butterfly flies out of the air and lands on the trainer's shoe. And I just lost it. I was just like, but through that whole experience, and there were a whole lot of other things that happened, I felt like it was my dad saying to me, you don't have to die like I did to be that butterfly and to find that greatness that's in you. And that's the cool thing about the caterpillar, right? Caterpillar doesn't go get plastic surgery. It finds within its own self this transformation and what its true potential can be. And there's this process of morphing, this process of going through struggles. You think of a caterpillar, it's like ugly. Like no one, birds want to eat it. Fishermen want to put it on a hook kind of thing. And then it morphs into this incredible creature. And that's really what my book's about. It's not about light and dark spirits and destroying things. It's like within all of us, there's this true greatness, and we can find that today.
Yeah, and you talk about all of that quite a bit in your book, and the stories you just told are in your book too. So I would encourage people to pick it up and read it.
Although,
can you find it?
I was just going to say,
maybe I should get it reprinted, and
yeah. Where does it go to Spring Creek Book Company?
I know, yeah, it's a little confusing. So I
actually have an agreement that all of it is my property. Okay. So I guess I could. I don't know.
Yeah, just a thought. I mean,
I could always write a new book.
True.
Or add on to this one, keep it. It's wonderful, but right. That's so funny. That was a sincere recommendation by John because it's Spring Creek Book Company.
Right.
So you meant that.
As we were talking earlier, I see a lot of myself in your book. So I think that was a big part of it.
I appreciate that too, but
my family the family dynamic was very similar in some ways to yours. I had two brothers, but when you talk about your mother always saying everything's okay, that's exactly how my mother was. And things weren't always okay. In fact, things were not that okay a lot of times.
Right. Yeah.
But it didn't matter. It wasn't going to be talked about. And one of the things that drove me crazy is that my mom would always say, we may have problems in our family, but we put everything on the table. And so when you talked earlier about just trying to be truthful about yourself and your family, like that wasn't accurate. All the important things, they never were on the table.
Your family.
My family. Yeah, my family.
Right. Yeah.
And so, but my point is that you talk about those types of dynamics in your book and your relationship with your mom and your dad, and that there wasn't this perfect family. And I think, by the way, that you said earlier that Chad was seeking this perfection in your book.
Right.
I think that's part of the answer in terms of understanding Chad Daybell. But I think it's interesting. It was interesting to me that one of your struggles was trying to be truthful about your past and honest about it, and not succumb to this idea that everything's always great and everything's okay.
Yeah.
Or to avoid that, because as Chad would say, no, you're writing for an LDS audience.
Right.
I remember you saying no, I'm writing from my heart. He didn't get that.
So my belief is in Christ, and he atoned for our sins because he knew we were going to make mistakes, that we weren't going to be perfect. And so it's turning to him, turning to Christ with your imperfections. It's really laying it all on the table for him. And that's my belief. That's my religion, is having faith in Christ and knowing that he can redeem for who I am, who is not a perfect person. It was hard with, wanting answers growing up and seeing that everything wasn't perfect in my own family. Far from it. And quite frankly, I'm really glad that it wasn't. I really am. I don't think God intended for us to have these perfect families or perfect experiences. I don't. And so I'm glad for that. But with my own kids, I started doing this thing with them. I don't even know. It was when they were younger, and I just said, if you're interested, let's go. We'll just spend a Saturday morning, and we'll just go hang out for a couple hours. Do whatever you want. We can go get something to eat, go shop. We can go play golf, whatever. And you can ask me anything you want. You can ask me questions about my life. You can ask questions about your future. You can ask questions about, anything. Would you want to do that? And they're like, yeah. Because I never had my parents, I would have killed I had so many questions that I just stressed about, and I had anxiety over, and I worried about, that I wished I could have talked to somebody, my parents, preferably. And the funny thing is I had these really close friends, and we never talked. Our conversations were just so on the surface, and we all had things going on in our lives, and none of us knew about it when we were growing up. So I did that with my kids. I still do it today. It's wonderful, and it's been a good thing, coming out of this. And it is a message with Chad that does ring with me often, is just trying so hard to be honest. And I just think he was so dishonest and so disingenuous, and it led to his destruction and demise ultimately, and the lives that are impacted and just destroyed because of it. It's never lost on me. And I think about these people, that have been a big part of this, the Colby Ryans and Kay and Larry and my heart and Chad's own children.
Yeah.
In fact, when they were testifying, and I'm just like, he has spun a web around them, and here's the person that can have the most influence on who they are. And clearly he's abused that sacred opportunity and responsibility. And I called my daughter when I saw Emma, and I said, you call me out. You if I'm not being true to you, call me out on it. Don't, because I just didn't want my children I want them to be, just to be in a real space. It just broke my heart that, for these kids, Chad's kids, to where they are today, just, and I don't know where they are today. And I really, are they, but I just feel, and it just seemed to appear to me from their testimony in that trial that they believed their dad was innocent. Yeah. And that was just heartbreaking to me.
That they became a part of his web of deceit.
Yeah.
A lot of people have mentioned the day that Emma and Garth testified, Chad's kids, that it was a very, very difficult day in the trial. Prosecutor Rob Wood, who we interviewed, stated that seeing the children's autopsies was the absolute worst day, and followed by listening to Chad Daybell's children testify was very difficult for him. And it sounds like it had that same effect. Were you watching daily in this day? I mean, yeah, what were your thoughts as you heard them talk about their mother and yeah, I'm just curious, as someone that knew Tammy and knew Chad, and we're watching this from a personal level.
Oh boy. as far like my experience with Tammy. So Tammy was younger. Again, I had very little interaction with Tammy. Her older brother was my age, and I had limited interaction with him in high school. Again, everyone,
Yeah.
right? But you're not really friends. And just when Chad was in my house, Tammy didn't say it's doing the book, and so Chad and Tammy were basically like we are sitting around the dining room table. I don't recall Tammy speaking ever, and like ever. And I was almost. It was weird because I like to talk, right? And just let's have a conversation. I would, I want you to feel welcome in my home. I want you to feel, you know, and it's almost to me a personal challenge. If someone's not going to talk, I'm going to get you to talk, right? And she just, I mean, I don't think she ever looked up from her computer. I don't ever think she stopped typing. And there was a different and weird dynamic. And I don't know what the dynamic was, but it was the one directing the whole process was Chad. And it was a certain narrative in a certain way, and he was good at it. And I just think about that with his kids and how it just felt like to me that I think they mentioned that Chad and Emma talked daily while he was in jail. And I can only imagine what his spin on everything was, because in his mind, he wasn't wrong. And he certainly wasn't going to come clean to his daughter. I don't think. And so to me, that was just seeing kind of the dynamic of Chad and the limited understanding that I have. I'm not here to claim to be an expert on Chad Daybell at all. But just watching and seeing what I did see of him, and I just can only imagine what he was saying to those kids that just wasn't the truth. And does that ever go away? Do they ever come to the light and just go? I mean, I found things out about my parents later on in their life that nobody knew about that were really shocking, that I'm not going to talk about here, but they were shocking, and the impact it had on, I've had people say, you've already lost your mom, to what extent will you lie or maybe not see the truth of things? You'll kind of spin it in your head to a point where you go, I can't lose both my parents. I can't come to grips with that my dad could ever do something like that. And from an outsider, from me, I want to tell Chad, tell the truth, but from his kid's perspective, maybe they don't want that truth. Maybe it's just too painful. Maybe it's too hard. I don't know, but it's just, I think it would be easier for them if they did know the truth, if they could come, at least they knew what the truth was. And then you can kind of go from there, but to just continue on living your whole life thinking, oh, and police are bad. They did a poor job of doing this. There could be it was Lori's fault. It was Alex. It was someone else's fault. And living that life for the rest of your life, I just think it would be extremely debilitating.
Part of what you're talking about is dealing with the truth would mean they would have to see their father in a completely different manner. Right? It would be a shift from seeing their father as somewhat heroic and the guy who writes these wonderful books, the guy who, gets these visions from God, to someone who's a murderer.
So I hate looking in the mirror because I look at myself from the inside out, right? And I think I look thin and beautiful. And then I look in the mirror and I go, dude, you're overweight. Like you are not the best version of yourself. And it's like, but I don't feel that way. Like I don't see myself that way internally. And so, or I see myself when I'm 20, or think of and then I went, oh, I'm getting some gray hair and I got, my eyes are kind of, they're they just got bags under them, and there's things, that just aren't the same, but I feel the same inside. And so I think maybe it is hard for us to really see the true version of who we are. Maybe we're all in denial. I don't know. I don't know, but I think it would be, because I swear to you guys that I think it's the thing I think the most of is just being honest with myself. Seriously, it's just if there's those two things, being free and just being honest with yourself. I think those are the things that jump out at me the most from all of this. Well, there's more.
There's always more. Yeah, well, those are two really important elements of self-awareness.
So
Something Chad does not
Yeah,
have.
something Chad Daybell seems to lack.
the other thing that I've tried to figure out, okay, I can understand trying to, having the really cute girl pay attention to you and trying to spin, because no one dies in that, supposedly. Where do you go off the rails to murder? Like that's another thing that just jumps out at me, and I'm just like at what moment did that click in? Like, what urge were you just trying to satisfy? What lie were you trying to spin? What in the world were you trying to convince yourself of that would make you believe that murder was okay?
Wait for that, because that's really important and the probably next entire half of this interview, but I'm not quite ready. Can I go back to one thing first? I want to talk about Tammy one more time, because I'm not ready to move on from what I've heard about Tammy. And you shared this with me on the phone for a little bit, because I'm learning that in some ways there are two experiences with Tammy Daybell for people. And I don't think there are two Tammy Daybells. Let me be very clear. I think Tammy Daybell was a very authentic, kind-hearted person, but there are observers seeing two different sides to Tammy Daybell. And so I just want to talk about it, because Heather Daybell interviewed at this very table, and she kind of implied that they weren't friends, that Chad Daybell would talk for her. And Heather and I have talked, and she's now thought and said that she believes that there was some control by Chad. She didn't know that then. She thought that maybe Tammy was cold or not warm. Now she thinks, oh gosh, what was Chad telling her about me? And she testified in court that Chad and Tammy were coming to her house, and Chad said, we're coming, but don't ask Tammy any questions, only ask me questions. And then Heather said, but I didn't do that. Tammy's a grown woman. Jump ahead, and another day in trial that I noticed, because I sat there each day in court, was the day that seemed to make Chad the most expressive was a day when about 4 women testified for Tammy that were her friends. And they said that she was warm, and that she was friendly, and that she was social. And Chad was over there. He had been pretty, I don't know, not stoic, but expressionless until this day. And he was shaking his head like, this isn't true. It seemed to really upset him. So I just want to go back to really quickly, because I find this point interesting about Tammy. First off, how many days did they come over? Like, I want to explain that too. They came over for like months, or a month, every day to your house.
Yeah, not not necessarily on the weekends, but during the week they would come over, and then I would actually spend time writing, and then they would come back, but they were consistently in my house. I would say 2 to 2.5 months.
So every day for 2.5 months,
Yeah.
give or minus weekends. And she never said a word.
No.
So
I'm sitting here in my mind trying to go. It was almost like, and again, I was so focused on writing a book, and I was constant, the whole, because the whole focus was on writing. So I'm writing stuff, and I'm editing, and I'm talking about stories, and just trying to, and she just very quietly sat there and typed stuff the whole entire time. Now, I looked at this at the time as Tammy's shy. Like, and I don't know. I couldn't tell you who Tammy Daybell was. I don't know her. I didn't know her. I would, from listening to a lot of what happened, she seemed to me like a person that once you get to know her, then she really opens up. And I'm sure that she's in my house. She knows the folklore of, this is a guy who went on to do things and all that stuff. And maybe it was intimidating. I don't know. I have no idea. Maybe just being shy. It was just, I don't really have much to say to this conversation because it's not my thing. It's really, and so, but I had a tremendous amount of respect for how hard she worked. Like, I felt like Tammy was doing everything. Like, it was like Chad was kind of orchestrating. And that was another thing that I observed about Chad was I think Chad was gifted at getting people to do his work, to do his bidding, because when, I think he was masterfully good at manipulating people. And I think that's what happened with this kids. I think it's what happened with Tammy. I think it's what happened with Lori and Alex and so many other people. And even me, because we had he came to my house about writing this book, and he was like, and I was, well, I'm talking to Deseret Book too. And he's like, oh, you don't want to, and he was giving me all the reasons why I shouldn't go with them and why I should go with him and why all of these different things. And it wasn't not, it was like, well, I grew up with Chad, so he's Chad from the neighborhood, I should be able to trust him. It's this local, I like the feel of that. It's not this big name. You're not just some other number to some, and he really played into all of that. So as far as Tammy goes, I think, and maybe it was a way for her to protect herself against Chad. And again, I'm speculating here that if I just lay low around him and I kind of do my thing when I'm not around him, then it works for our relationship. I don't know, but I certainly, there was a definite Chad trying to pull the strings mentality, and I saw that then.
I agree with them. I don't know. I think the analysis is accurate. But I think in many ways Tammy was subservient, and I mean I think that's what Scott's talking about. And it was clear that Chad was in control, right? That in many ways this would be kind of a typical, typical in the sense that Chad would run the house, but atypical in the sense that his wife wouldn't be able to speak a single word for over 2 months.
Not speaking a single word for 2 months, knowing what I know about Tammy Daybell, all I can think is someone said to her, do not talk. I got this just the same way that Heather Daybell was told by Chad, don't address Tammy. If he said that to them, I just wonder what he's saying to her. Like, look, and I think Chad was the one intimidated by you. Let's be honest. He got the book deal. He got the book deal. Deseret Book didn't. He wasn't going to lose this. He was going in with Tammy, and he was saying to her, don't say anything. Like, and I'll call it what I see, and that's, or what I think, and I think it was coercive control. I think he controlled. I've said it before. I said it during trial. I think he controlled his family in many ways, like a cult, like subtly controlling them.
Which is the same dynamic, I think, that put him on the path towards murder.
Yeah.
I just wanted to explore that because it was shocking to hear that for 2.5 months this woman sat there not saying a word.
It wasn't normal. It wasn't a normal dynamic. And at the time, I just thought, well, she's shy. It almost felt like she had like a deadline. Like I don't have time to talk to any people. And just type away kind of thing. And because but it was at the time noticeable, and then later on you kind of connect all these dots and you go, well, okay, that makes sense of how the dynamic probably really was.
I'm going to say this too, because we need to remember, I still have not finished reading what Chad Daybell said about you. We'll keep talking about that too in his book, The Way That John and I Learned About You. But
Well, he if I remember correctly, it's an important story because he talks about the dreams.
About how he became a visionary.
Right.
And how his brain had been opened up to seeing, into the future. He explains how he got this gift. And I'm one of the examples of him seeing into the future. And this is not the truth. This is actually not how things happen.
all right,
either.
let's read it now. We couldn't get past the fact that he called you his friend. Well, that stopped us in our tracks.
I think, yeah, well, friend, but I gave him acknowledgement of what a wonderful job he did in writing my book.
Do you have any Chad Daybell stories from school? Do any things that stand out?
So here's one thing that stood out to me. I recently was I have a million photos from
Yeah.
Little League football all the way through high school, college, professional. I mean, tons of photos. And I was going through a rather significant amount of them, organizing and what have you. And I came across the photo from my senior year of high school. It was our team basketball picture. So there's the team coaches and the managers. And sitting on the floor with his legs folded is one of our team managers from my senior year, and it's Chad. And what struck me was, I don't even remember Chad Daybell being a manager on our basketball team when I was in high school. And that's my recollection, is that he was forgettable. I mean, I knew who he was. Like, I didn't, I was focused on playing basketball, my teammates on the team, the coaches, but I could tell you the coaches were, I could tell you the players were, but I couldn't tell you who the managers. And I'm like, oh my goodness, Chad Daybell was one of the managers on our basketball team. Those are the memories that I have from him when I don't have memories.
That's a really pertinent story, in the sense that I think that explains exactly why Chad Daybell started heading in the wrong direction, because he wanted to be memorable. He thought that he was special. He thought that he should be memorable. And the fact that Scott Mitchell is now sitting at our table saying, I don't remember the guy. He never stood out. He was right. He wasn't memorable. He was one of the managers on my basketball team senior year, and I don't even recall that. That would be a nightmare for Chad Daybell to hear that story.
Now, one thing
disappointing.
No, yeah. One thing that I do remember was, like, you all take we took the ACT test, college exam, and I was with my friends the night before we were supposed to study, and
Right.
we spent almost the whole night studying for this. And I think we ended up in the backyard jumping on the trampoline, something like we didn't take it that serious. But what I remember was that Chad Daybell scored a perfect score on that test. That's the memory I have. Like, if you're going to go, well, who's Chad Daybell? I vaguely remember that he was on the student council. I didn't know that he was our manager on a basketball team, and he had a perfect score on the ACT test. And beyond that, from my experience in high school, I don't remember anything else.
And I think that's part of the issue, is that he perceived himself to be a memorable person, a special person.
His biggest fear, though, was in his book, and you talked about this in our original podcast episode, where he stated there's not a single, he was at BYU, and he said there's not a single person that knows who I am. I'm looking for that, which
Yeah,
is
I
why
can
I'm
show
looking
you.
down. Oh,
I've
John,
got it.
John's got this book memorized.
Right here.
Okay, just talking about that. When I started college, here, you brought this up back in early
Yeah.
2020.
Mhm.
When I started college at BYU that fall, I continued to live at home, but it was admittedly a lonely time. My friend had gone to Utah Valley State College on a basketball scholarship, and so we really didn't cross paths too often anymore. I had other friends at BYU, but they were very busy. Many of them left on their missions. I vividly remember walking across the BYU campus during a January snowstorm and thinking, quote, there isn't a soul on earth who cares what I'm doing right now, end quote. John writes in the little side here about Chad, motif for his life.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're talking about, is that, he'd be very disappointed to know that you didn't remember that he was the manager, right? Don't worry, he can't come after you. As far as I know, he's behind bars right now.
He's got bigger concerns right now.
Although he may listen to this.
It's an interesting thought, because we had class reunions, and fairly well attended. People have different opinions about, am I ever going to go to a class reunion? Or
Yeah.
And a good number of people in our class would attend. Then we had, I think it was our 30th, which was 2 years short of our 50th birthday. So everyone said, do you guys want to get together in 2 years? It's not a reunion, but we're all turning 50 in that year. So we can have a party celebrating that we're turning 50. And this was right around the time they wrote the book. It was after I wrote the book. And so we have a photo from our 50th not quite fifth year, every 5-year reunion. So it was between 30 and 35. And he's in the picture. And I'm not talking, because Chad didn't. So we're at this party. We're all out hanging around. And he never comes up to me. He never says anything. But he's on the back row. And as you talk about this nothingness, and I remember purposely going, because I'm tall, right? They always stick me on the back row. And I said, you know what? I'm getting in the front row. I'm tired of being on the back row. And I just kind of jokingly, so I knelt down, so
you want to be acknowledged for once.
Exactly. And here was Chad on the back row, kind of hiding. And this would have been the summer of 2018. So it would have been shortly before he met Lori. And I would imagine, oh boy, because I've just lived my life, right? I haven't thought much. I mean, I do from time to time think about my life. And from time, I actually tried to figure out how many people know who I am. Just because, so if you play in the NFL, you play for the Miami Dolphins, I don't know, there's 21 million people that live in Florida, and maybe 7 million are Miami Dolphin fans. So they know so there's 7 million people in Florida that potentially know who I am. Michigan is, NFL fans, whatever. Biggest Loser, they probably have 3-4 million people tune in to The Biggest Loser. So there's probably 20 million people in the world potentially that might know my name, right? And you go places and people go, I know who you are. Or you get recognized. I have people send me fan mail. And I'm just living my life, right? I'm just a dad. I do my thing. And yet there's this other part of me, like, you're well known. And you can't help but go, well, that's kind of cool. Like, human nature is like, I mean, you just, it's not beyond you to go, hey, it makes you feel kind of special to be recognized. it sure stinks when they kick you out and you're no longer important. Like it's a hard pill to swallow. So in some regards, my life kind of went the opposite way, maybe from Chad, where it was like you're well known till you get older and then no one cares. But there is this side of you that can get very intoxicated with being famous. I would imagine that there's some notoriety that's happened from what you guys are doing. You know, there's a level of, hey, I know who you are. Like when you guys reached out, I know who you guys were. And so I could imagine for Chad being nobody, Cypher in the Snow at BYU, to starting to talk at these prepper conferences, people coming up to you, oh, you have a publishing company. Oh, and seeing Julie Rowe near-death experiences and go, well, I'll make up my own near-death experiences and I'll become even more popular. And I'll start telling, I can spin these lies into the truth, and you can get intoxicated with being relevant and I can imagine, because don't we all want that? Don't we all want to be loved? And to what extent would we go to actually have someone think we're amazing? And I can imagine that as that unfolded, and it had to have been the crowning moment for Chad when Lori goes, wow. Like for him, that must have just been probably more than he could have handled, to have felt such a zero at one moment, and then someone, fame, notoriety, whatever level, the human that just our human nature inclination. I've felt it in my life. I mean, it's cool when people, like, it isn't, so I can imagine what that was like for Chad. Not trying to defend anything, but just the human nature of it all.
Well, I think that's actually a great segue to the question you asked that John was about to answer, and then I cut you guys off, honestly, is how did he get there? Like, how would he, what was the exact question? It was about Lori. Like, we all understand attention maybe from the opposite sex, feeling good, but like how did he get to murder? Was that the question, or is some right?
Yeah, because so like I can understand a lot of this because people don't die, like him going off the rails, right? But I can't wrap myself around what at what point did he get where he's like, okay, I'm gonna kill some people, because there was planning that went on, there was thought, there was discussion. This went over time. People were shot at who didn't die.
Right.
They were aware of things long before, a lot of them happened. And I mean, I have kind of a theory on it, but I in my mind, I'm just like, how do you get to that point?
Well, let's hear your theory. I think, that all the dynamics we've been talking about, I think they're all relevant. The fantasy piece about the fiction versus fact piece, the need for kind of attention and fame. I think all of these play a role. In terms of actually getting to the point of murder, though, maybe we haven't gotten there yet, but yeah, I'd love to hear.
So I think the murder part for me. So Chad and Lori are going back and forth. He's in Idaho. She's in Arizona. Then she kind of like the sparks of a budding new romance. There's just nothing more just exhilarating in life than to be in love.
The
right?
text, you're familiar with the text, right?
Right. Yeah. The cringing. Okay. Yeah.
The cringeworthy
right.
text. Right.
I think I saw this thing from Mike Myers where he goes, like, he described his character in Austin Powers, and he goes like, romance is just and sex, and it's corny, right? But it isn't in private. So he tried to make it in as Austin Powers, and it was kind of as cringeworthy as Austin Powers, and that was, but it was very cringy. And so they're going back and forth, right? And I think Lori was off the rails, like mentally. I think there's
she had some mental health issues for sure.
And But the one who was willing to murder was Alex. To me, like he's the one that maybe didn't have as much of a conscience about it.
Yeah.
And I think when Chad, because they were kind of going back and forth, and Lori was kind of telling him, just go be with your wife, and when Charles was murdered, I think Chad goes, oh, like this is serious. Like it's kind of like, okay, she's done her part now. And now it's my part. And I don't want to be disrespectful to anyone because, these are people's lives that have been destroyed, and I don't want to callously talk about this, but it, just thinking through it all. So Chad all of a sudden goes, wow, she's serious. Like this is real. But I think Chad also, and maybe he realized, look what I manipulated someone into doing. And because I think Alex was the trigger man in all of it. I think it was even so with Tammy.
Yeah.
And because I was like, I don't think Chad is, I think he's not strong enough. I think he would be too cowardly to do it on his own. I think he'd need to enlist help. And I think so it goes back to that. He's really good at getting people to do what he's not powerful or capable or strong enough to do, which sounds terrible that you're strong enough or, but he could get someone else to do it for him. I think that's what ultimately happened, that he saw Lori and he goes, okay, this is serious. I'm going to do this, but I can't really do it. So I'm going to get Alex to do it, or at least help me do it. And so then I'm kind of not doing it on my own, but I think he was, and so
when you say get it, in this particular instance, you're talking about Tammy.
Well, so I think he saw Lori kill Charles. So he goes, okay, she's in now. I got to be in,
right?
Because he still has a wife,
yeah,
and he can't divorce her because then he's not a good LDS.
He's not a prophet.
He's not a prophet. He's all the, it goes back to if I divorce my wife, I'm that zero in the snow at BYU.
Yeah.
And so he can't be that person. Again, I'm spitballing here. I don't come here with any authority.
No,
I'm just a guy that just kind of speculates.
You're doing great. I'm a little worried that he's going to start a true crime podcast. More competition.
I will guarantee. No, I'll do a true sports.
Okay.
As a busy mom and as a journalist, I need to make every minute count, whether that's working or creating more family time. And insomnia, when it comes to that, is not my friend. It can throw everything off. When it comes to work, I like my alone time before the sun is up. I like to be able to sit there and work so that as soon as the family wakes, I can focus on them. And so if I am dealing with insomnia the night before and I'm up till 3 a.m. fretting and worrying and tossing and turning, I pretty much can kiss the next day goodbye. And it's not just work that suffers, but the entire family. I used to try over-the-counter sleep aids, but those caused grogginess like no other. It didn't matter how much caffeine I drank the next day. Grogginess was part of daily life. And that is where Dream has been a game changer for me and for our entire family, honestly, so much so that is why I am sharing the good news, because Dream is a revolutionary approach to sleep in the form of a guilt-free, indulgent hot chocolate with natural sleep-supportive ingredients. And get this, just so everybody is aware, because I'm sure many people are wondering, yes, it is gluten-free, it is dairy-free, it is vegan, it is non-GMO, and it is keto-friendly. It allows me to fall asleep, stay asleep longer, and then I wake up refreshed without the grogginess. I wake up energized and ready to get to work. I actually feel less stressed, so it helps my emotions. I feel completely rested and alert all day, even feeling like I can be more emotionally present as a parent. It is an amazing bedtime routine that I have now used for nearly a year. Our whole family has benefited and knows the routine. And mostly, They benefited because better sleep means a better you. It is a low calorie drink. I wind down each night, just 15 calories, no added sugar. I sip it about a half hour before bed, give or take. I've also made dream popsicles to enjoy this summer in this heat wave. I've recently been loving the capsules during this 115-degree weather. Dream has given our gems an awesome deal for their first order. You can head to the website shopbeam.com/hidden true crime and enter the code true crime for up to 35% off your first order. You can also just click the link that's in the description of this video. That is there, shopbeam.com/hidden true crime, or see this QR code, hit that QR code, or not hit it, but shine your phone on that QR code. Use that QR code for up to 35% off your first order. Just enter code true crime at checkout. Let us know what you think. I hope it changes your life as much as it has changed ours.
So he feels like, okay, I'm in, but I just don't, because I mean, Alex tried to shoot Tammy.
Right.
So it wasn't like, you know, and then and Chad can just kind of wash his hands of everything and be clear of it. And I think with the children, I think what happened there is, I really believe Alex killed all of them. And I think when they were trying to dispose of Tylee, that it was messy and it was a lot longer and it was going to draw a lot more attention to his neighbors and his neighborhood. And I think they go, that's, and maybe they just was like, this is too much. So JJ was taken care of in a totally different way. And for the life of me, why he buried them on his property, unless he really was trying to spin the narrative even more to say, well, I didn't really kill them. They were zombies. And so we want to preserve them. We want them around us. We want them near, you know, that to me, I guess could be the narrative that he was trying to convince himself of. You know, I don't, you know.
Yeah, it's not totally clear. I mean, I think some of it had to do with control, just wanting to feel like he knew where the bodies were, and he knew that if there was evidence, he could move it or control it, right? That some of it could be that with the bodies in his backyard, it reminded him of his power, that he felt like there were trophies. You know, serial killers often collect trophies from their.
Yeah.
This was some version of that.
It was someone's driver's license.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I wonder too if it isn't that same mindset of I'm smarter than everyone else.
True.
Like
Yeah,
no one in the
sure.
world, like who buries them in their backyard? It's brilliant. I'm so smart.
Who's going to look there?
I drove by his house, and before the kids were found, and he was home, and I was 10 seconds from getting out of the car and walking to the front door.
Oh man.
And just saying, hey Chad, I just happened to be in the neighborhood, thought I'd drop in and say hi. And I almost did it. And I was literally on that south end of the property. And I was looking right there, and they were right there, and no one even knew it at the time. It was quite a moment.
If you did drop by, I presume you would have taken your cell phone out without him knowing and turn on record, and you would have elicited a confession.
Right.
It might have worked. Scott Mitchell might have been.
He would have been so stunned to see it.
It wouldn't have been a fluffy conversation.
No, you would have called him out. I know you. I don't know you well,
Yeah.
but I know you well enough now to know that you would have said, "Be honest, Chad."
Come on, where are the kids?
Yeah,
Like-
yeah.
I think he would have been stunned. I mean, that's an amazing story that you were so concerned about it. I mean, did you go up there to see the property, or what? Why were you?
I just happened to be up at Yellowstone, and I was like,
Gotcha.
okay, I know, it's like, well, I'm in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
I drove all the way from Utah to
Right.
Idaho. I might as well stop in, but
Yeah.
I didn't.
When that makes me wonder. I mean, I know how you feel now, but when the news hit, and you've stated you would have never thought the Chad Daybell you knew was capable of this, hindsight's 2020. When it hit the media, did you realized something was not good? Because some people stood by him until the children were found.
So initially, when Tammy died, I got a text message. And because again, you just in a small town, I got a text message. Hey, Chad Daybell's wife Tammy died last night. And because we're young, we're not supposed to be dying right now, and it's one of our classmates, and we, it's like, oh. And so you're sad. Then a couple of weeks later, it's like Chad got remarried. And then you're like, oh. And then you're like, well, and now he's gone, and now and these kids are gone. And at first, when it started unraveling, and it wasn't hard to put the dots together. I mean, any logical person would go, okay, there's no way. There's no way her husband dies and the kids go and his wife, there's just no. And then Alex dying. But in my mind, I was kind of like, okay, Chad's in this alternate universe, right? He's in this prepper, this alternate religious view. And my initial thought that I carried for a long time was they've hid these kids. There's some compound, there's some underground railroad of people networking together, and they're protecting these kids for a decent amount of time. That's what I really thought. And then I went on Dateline with Keith Morrison, and they interviewed me. And the one of the producers, he's like, they have a mountain of digital forensic evidence on the two of these people. And then I'm like, oh. And then he actually texted me and he goes, they're going to Chad Daybell's house in a half an hour or 10 minutes or something like that. And they believe the kids are there. And then it's just like, it's just crazy. But to be married in such a short time after his wife had passed away, that's when the initial red flags go up, and you're just like, yeah, this just, and then you're like, there's no way. Like, this is Chad Daybell. Like there's no way that this is that way. And having the interaction that I had with Chad, writing the book and all that, I was like, there's no way. And then you get into it, and I followed it. I followed you guys. I've watched every last bit of it. Then you go, there's no way he didn't do it. Like you're just totally flipped around.
So initially you were like Jeffrey Dahmer's neighbor who
Right.
said he's the nicest guy I've ever met.
Yeah.
He could never do that.
And yes, and not only that, and again, you grow up in a small town, people don't do that in a small, it just doesn't happen. And it really probably does happen, but not to you, not to your neighborhood, not from where you're from. And to see that happen, but I've lived in the world, right? I'm not naive. I've seen and heard about everything. And so you don't put anything past anyone, no matter where the circumstance, who they are, where they grew up, how they appear in public. I think what would be the superpower of all superpowers is to see, okay, this is how this person really is, right? To just have that, to really, the truth serum, Wonder Woman's golden lasso, just put it on people is like, you can't lie to me. I know what you're up to.
That'd be great for true crime podcast hosts to have that superpower.
But
I know not only were you Jeffrey Dahmer's neighbor, you had Jeffrey Dahmer publish your book.
Right. Could you imagine? Okay, look, his apartment smelled a little funny. I didn't know what it was at the time. Not familiar with that smell, but now I know exactly what it is. But just really quick on the other side of this, I don't want to live my life looking at every person going, oh, you're Chad Daybell. I want to hope for the best in people. I want to hope that people can find goodness in them and not, every person's got this terrible, dark secret that we don't know about.
It's a big difference between covering sports and covering true crime, by the way, right? Like sports, the narrative in most sports events is somebody wins, they win heroically. Like there's always, sports
Right.
usually has a feel good story,
Right.
Whereas in true crime, not so much.
Yeah.
Things don't tend to end particularly well.
But folks tune into true crime.
Well, they do.
We
Yeah,
love
they
the
do.
train wreck. We love to see just,
Absolutely.
like,
Right.
look, I'm in your house and, here, and I drove here to talk about this. Right.
Right, yeah.
And
And we're grateful. Thank you for doing that.
But it's fascinating. Even if it wasn't personal, if I didn't have a connection to it, it's still fascinating to me. And maybe that's just the sick, sad part of us as a society, but it's fascinating to see what we're capable of as humans.
I agree. And in that sense, I think true crime is sort of the other end of sports. I mean, I know there's some sports stories that aren't great with, sometimes athletes get violent or there's those types of stories, but
Can we cover Tanya Harding one day, for example?
we may have to collaborate with Scott on that one. I don't, that's
Maybe we're a true crime sports podcast. We'll talk about that later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me tell you about crime. All right. Every year when I was in the NFL, you'd start training camp and it was boring. And you'd have all these meetings. And you'd have all of these meetings because I think there were 359 crimes committed by 1,600 NFL players in an off season. And part of it was young, dumb, and have money.
Yeah.
And time. Like in the off season, you could do whatever you wanted. So it's just a recipe for disaster. Not only that, it's like no one says no they don't say no to professionally. Whatever you want.
Right.
Whatever you want to do, you're above the law, you're all of these things. I mean, if you want, actually mixing true crime and professional sports would be the perfect storm.
Yeah.
I just watched a thing on Steve McNair. It's the anniversary of when he was murdered. Ray Caruth murdered his girlfriend because she was pregnant. I mean, it's horrific. There's, sports is definitely not immune to it.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think there's a mix of elements there that are potentially combustible. Fame, money, entitlement. Right? There's all these elements, and like it or not, you're going to get those things. So I'm sure you had to deal with some of those issues too.
Yeah, and they would try to steer you clear of that. They'd act out these scenarios. Like they'd have actors come in and they go, okay, so here's a situation and you could potentially get and what they would say is these are actual events that have happened to NFL players. And so you kind of laughed at them, but then you realize, no, this really happened. This isn't hypothetical.
Wait, just so I'm clear about this. I want to wrap my mind around this. So was this with Miami or
every team?
Every team.
It was a league mandate that you had to have, I don't know, I guess they would be HR meetings over like the proper way to handle situations. And they would tell us, they go, you guys you have a bullseye. You're a target for everyone.
In now that we're talking about it, I have to bring this is in your book, by the way.
Probably
you had one of those moments.
I'm trying to remember which one.
You were having a hard time in Detroit.
Oh.
And a fan told you
there were 4 fans, actually.
4 fans, right? Well, it wasn't entirely clear, but you said, we're 4 fans. One of them said you suck,
right?
And given the fact that you had all of these issues going on at the time, and
snapped.
You snapped. You want to tell the story?
Sure.
Okay, because this is completely relevant to those HR reenactments.
We played a Thanksgiving game every year in Detroit. It's the only game in town. It's a great game to be a part of. After the game got over, my family would watch the game in a suite at the top of the stadium. Game gets over, you get dressed, you talk to the media, your family's waiting outside the locker room, and you go home. So I go do all this. I go outside the locker room. I can't find my family. I'm like, where I want to go home.
Yeah.
Like I'm tired. Like I want to go home. So I'm like, well, maybe they're still up in the suite. So I go up in the elevator to the top of the stadium. I start walking down one of the corridors where all the fans are. There's still fans left in the stadium, not many. And as I'm walking, I'm like, this probably isn't a good idea. Because like you don't really interact with the fans like without, being on the field or,
Yeah.
there's some security there. And just as I thought this, I passed 4 guys. They're walking in the opposite direction of me and they recognize me. They go, Mitchell, you suck. And right as they said that, I was turning to go into the suite where my family was. My family wasn't in there. And so I'm just like, I just snapped. I'm just like, I'm tired of these fans. And so I turn around and by now they're kind of further down the corridor. I chase them down the corridor, 4 guys and me, and they go in the bathroom. So they don't know I'm behind them. They don't know that I'm chasing them. I get to the door of the bathroom. There's no door. It just goes in and angles and then angles back. So I'm standing in the opening and there's no one in the bathroom. There's no other door. And I just make a general statement. Does anybody in here have a problem with me? And it was like out of a Western in synchronized fashion. The 4 doors kick open and these guys walk out of these stalls and they look at me and they go, yeah, we have a problem with you. And I go, so I get into this conversation and this guy says, you want to hit me, don't you? And I'm like, I do. Like, I really do. And I really was. And I was like, I know I'm probably going to die today. But I'm going to go down swinging and I'm going to take on all 4 of these guys by myself. And I don't know if it was real. I don't know if it was an angel, but in the corner of the bathroom where nobody was, there was a janitor. And he had his cart, but he wasn't there before. And they had come out of all the stalls. He wasn't there. And he just said, you need to leave. He says, Scott, you need to leave right now. And I was like, you're right, I do. And I just turned her and walked away. And I found out later that they don't clean the bathrooms. They don't clean the stadium right after the game. And especially on Thanksgiving, they just leave it. So no one should have even been there. And so I have a guardian angel that's a janitor, I guess. But I had snapped. I had, because you get harassed. Like people, you hear, you get booed, you get, that's just part of the deal. But I just heard it this day, and I just from everything that was going on, I lost it. And I don't know what would have happened, because I was like, there was nothing holding me back. There was no filter. I was all into like brawl. And I've never been in a fight in my life. Like, and I didn't even know what I was doing, but I was going to go duke it out with a bunch of drunk fans in a bathroom.
Yeah. When I was reading that story, I thought, first of all, I thought you were going to actually get into the fight because you were so,
I was gone.
so revved up.
I was gone.
And as someone who's dealt with a lot of criminals, I mean, like, I know what that means.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard to exercise any restraint. Once you
The
get
rage,
past that point,
you're just
I thought, oh no. And so when I was reading that, I thought this is going to be the end of his career.
Yeah.
If you took that swing, your life trajectory probably would have changed.
Yeah. No question.
And so part of that moment is what separates a criminal or a felon from someone who's not. Having the ability to have in that moment, whether there's a janitor there or not, whether that's your conscience, whatever it is, having that ability to reflect or to have the self-awareness to walk away is what separates you or any person that doesn't become involved in crime from the criminal who's just going to be impulsive and they're going to get caught up in that moment and they're not going to have that moment where their conscience kicks in.
On my own, I would not have walked away. Like there was no debate in my mind. There was no like, this is the little angel and this little devil on. I wasn't going back. I was in. I went down that hallway, and I was all in. And had I again, I don't know what it was, but I know there's somebody said something to me. You need to walk away.
So you don't think it was the HR actors?
All that training I'd had.
Yeah, all that training to walk away.
The training would have said, Scott, don't get in the elevator and go up in the stadium right after a game and interact with the fans. That's not a good thing to do.
Right.
Like,
The training failed way before that moment, I guess. Yeah.
I want to finish what I started towards the beginning of this interview and read what Chad Daybell said about you in his book. And you are a sports commentator. You are trained to comment. So feel free to chime in.
I will.
As I read this. I won't read the part where we started. He is not your friend. We've got that down.
Yes.
He says, we were definitely friends. You're like, no, I wasn't his friend. He and I were often on the same basketball and baseball teams. His dad, Bill, was usually our coach. He starts sharing about how Miami Dolphins then drafted you in 1990, and you spent 3 years as Dan Marino's backup. When Dan suffered a season-ending injury in the 1993 season, Scott came in and led the team to several victories. He became a free agent and signed with the Detroit Lions, where he teamed up with the Hall of Fame running back Barry Sanders for several seasons. One of my favorite Thanksgiving Day memories was in 1995, when Scott led the Lions to a comeback victory over the Minnesota Vikings. He threw more than 400 yards and 4 touchdowns that day, and everyone in Springville was smiling. Hometown hero, though, I can see. He ended his career with the Baltimore Ravens and the Cincinnati Bengals before moving to Orlando, Florida, and doing well in the world of real estate. It seemed he had left Springville behind for good. But after I formed Spring Creek Books in 2004, though, I began having dreams that involved publishing a book with Scott. I would have them every month or so out of the blue. It's got to make you feel weird, right?
I don't think that happened, but okay.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm pretty sure it didn't happen, but
there was one very strange part to the dreams. Scott was really skinny, almost like we were in high school. That really stood out to me because after his NFL career, skinny is not a word you would have to use to describe Scott. He had gained a lot of weight.
This is the part that's a lie. Okay. So what happened is I would go back to Utah for our reunions. So this every 5 years. And I'd run into Chad and I said, Chad, I understand you started a publishing company. I'd really like to talk to you about writing a book. And he was like, never ever reached out to me, never acknowledged, never said, oh yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, let's do it. Never once did that ever happen. And when I retired from the NFL, I was not heavy. And when I played basketball 3 days a week at the YMCA, every like super competitive basketball. I didn't actually gain weight until 2009, 2010, which was almost 10 years after when I moved back to Utah. And I started drinking a lot of soda pop and stopped exercising. And it was just weird. It was, I don't know what it was. It was just like, and I put on weight quickly, but it wasn't until a long time after I actually retired. And it was really only 3 or 4 years before I went on The Biggest Loser. It wasn't like immediately after my career was over.
Okay, so
lies.
There's probably a bit of projection there too. It's not like Chad was staying thin, in his middle years.
The dreams were, just to interpret, the dreams were actually conversations.
Right.
Right. His dreams were conversations he was having with you that you were starting, not Chad, and Chad was actually dismissing them. In 2008, so this again, you were thin at this time. He surprised everyone when he moved from Florida and accepted a job as football coach at Springville High. That's kind of neat. You did that. He coached for 4 years and led the program back into prominence.
It was an amazing experience.
That's neat. Meanwhile, his weight kept increasing.
No, it just started to. So just so you know, coaching high school football players is brutal. And someone told me, look, their brains aren't fully developed. So they're susceptible to doing really stupid things. And it's what got me through coaching. It really did. That and a lot of pizza.
Just as an aside, the brain of our 7-year-old isn't fully developed either, and it too requires some pizza to manage.
You just that's how I just had to roll with it. Like, they're just going to do dumb things,
right?
You know.
John understands. In other words,
well, the sad thing for me, like, I've had my brain examined, so I went through some extensive, like 2 days, very long, grueling, with all the CTE and all everything that's going on.
Was that mandatory, by the way?
It was something that they offered with this settlement and all this stuff.
Okay, gotcha.
And unfortunately, fortunately, it just depends on the day of the week. I have a perfectly normal brain.
That's awesome. So
all the dumb things I do it with a full conscious, with the full complement of my brain. I have no excuse for the dumb. My idiocy is just, I own it. And I used to go, hey, look, I've been hit in the head a lot, so I may not remember this, or I may not do this right. And I can't use that now because it's been proven I have a normal brain.
I can't believe you're disclosing that publicly now, because there have to be some days where you're like, look, it's the CTE.
Oh, believe me, I want to so badly. I'm just like, oh boy.
Right.
Like, there's something
it's
really
gotta be the CTE.
Well, Chad Daybell doesn't have that excuse either.
No.
So you know.
Maybe he got hit in the head with a shovel while he's digging a grave. I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah. Well, he can't say he was hit in the head when he was managing your basketball team.
No.
After Scott moved back to Springville, we talked a few times about publishing his life story. The timing didn't feel right, though. Plus, my vision of a skinny Scott was just not possible. It would take an absolute miracle for him to match what I had seen.
It's all just lies. Just so bad.
It's just also very self-important. Then Scott's dad, Bill, passed away from obesity-related issues, and Scott had several meaningful experiences that indicated he needed to change his life. Scott had ballooned to 366 pounds, and he could see himself following his father's path. He decided to audition for the TV show The Biggest Loser and was accepted as a cast member. He soon became the focal point of the season as he confronted family and personal challenges. Scott was on his way to losing 124 pounds, and he miraculously looked like the guy I had seen in my dreams many years earlier. When there were 2 episodes of the show left to air, I felt a strong prompting to contact Scott. There's a lot of I language in here.
Yeah.
I sent him a Facebook message asking, quote, "Is it time we finally do your book?" End quote. Is that true?
No.
Okay.
He just knocked on my door one day.
He quickly responded that he had been having the same impression. Oh, is that true? That you'd had the same impression? He happened to be in Utah.
Did it mean that Chad was going to write my book? I'd been called from Deseret Book.
So you'd been reached out by a main publisher.
Uh-huh.
He happened to be in Utah for a short break before The Biggest Loser finale. So I went to his home and showed him the variety of books Spring Creek had produced over the years. So that's when he knocked on your door trying to sell you on him and not Deseret Book.
Which was the first time he reached out to me. So can I go back really quick?
Please.
So he said I ballooned up to 366 pounds. It was really 350 pounds. And I went to The Biggest Loser and I found out what my weight was when I got there. And so I was there for 2 weeks before the show started. So I thought I better get in training. So I literally was eating a house like every day trying to gain weight so that I could win. Right.
You have to be big in order to lose more.
So when I go on the show, the very first episode, and they weigh me, I have no idea how much weight I've gained in the last 2 weeks. And they go, your starting weight is 366 pounds. And my initial reaction was like, yes, I've gained weight. Like I can win this thing. And then I realized I'm like, oh, that's terrible. Oh, how could you do this? This is so, oh my goodness. So, and so it was kind of a funny, because at the end of the day, the Biggest Loser is a reality TV game show. Someone wins a prize at the end of the show, and I wanted to win. I'm not kidding. So kind of a little, so I wasn't 366 pounds, as he said there. I was actually 350.
And as you point out in your book, that most of the winners are able to lose half their body weight.
Right.
And you can't really compete with that.
No. They
So-
told me when I went on the show, you can't win, basically.
And you were like, watch this.
Well, they said if you can be conniving and get rid of the really heavy people, then you can win. I mean, that's, and I tried, but I wasn't very conniving, because all the very heavy people ended up winning the show.
So you probably haven't been recruited by Survivor yet.
So I actually had a dream. Speaking of people having dreams, okay,
Here's your dream.
this is my dream. This is where my mind is. So I had a dream that the Biggest Loser was starting a new reality TV show, and it was the Naked Biggest Loser. And so they called me. This is my dream. So they called me and they said, Scott, could you please come out here and help our contestants and show them that they need to be vulnerable and it's okay to be naked on the stage? And could you show them how to be naked? This was my dream. So I said, yeah, what's wrong with these people? So I go out to California and I go out there in my birthday suit. And I said, see, it's not a big deal. So just let yourself be totally vulnerable to all these people in the world. They're going to blurt out the bad parts anyways. You'll be fine. And that was my dream.
So you're the visionary.
So I'm not sure if it was a dream or if it became reality, or, the line between fantasy and reality has been very blurred for me.
So what I'm hearing is when they come up with they combine Naked and Afraid with The Biggest Loser,
Yeah.
you'll be like, I'm the visionary,
I'm like,
Chad.
that was my idea.
That was your dream, even better.
I'm thinking we need to find a producer to put that together now.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. That's okay. So
we've digressed.
no, that was good. That was good. What happens when you start reading Chad Daybell?
Yes.
So here we are. He goes to your house to pitch this to you, aka beg you. Other publishers were interested in his story, of course, and Scott listened to their offers. That was actually happening before he showed up. He waited nervously for a few days. I waited nervously for a few days, Chad says, for him to make his decision. But he finally called me and said, let's go for it. We took an unusual route in producing Scott's book. We had a court reporter come to Scott's home. I would love to talk to this court reporter now. Wow. He really opened up and shared a lot of things I'd never known before. I would occasionally ask him questions when we needed clarification, but for the most part, he just talked through the key moments of his life, such as how an answered prayer led him to attend the University of Utah instead of BYU. I'm a Ute, so well done. 7 hours later, we essentially had the book's contents. We came up with the fitting title, Alive Again. Is that true? He had the book contents and he came up with the title Alive Again?
Actually, I think it was, the title came from me. That was the whole idea was my idea.
Right.
And I said, and I even said just the whole transformation process. And I'd like to show kind of that be the book, this how we can become alive again, how we can overcome. And so that was all for me. 7 hours. No, it was multiple days with the court reporter. And then once we had the manuscript, it was a long process of actually, because you got the essence of the stories or the dialogue or whatever. And so then just kind of correcting my poor speech and all of those things, it took some time.
Scott spent a couple of weeks adding stories and refining the text while I double-checked game scores and other details. I'm so happy with how the book turned out. He included several spiritual experiences you would not have expected from a tough football player. His perception of a tough football player, I might say.
See,
it's
I
a
would
true
read that
hero's journey.
I would read that as Chad saw me as a dark spirit. You wouldn't expect that from a dark spirit. Like you wouldn't get spiritual stories from, because I wasn't included in the 144,000 that I wasn't on his list.
Does that take you off?
With the competitive side of me a little bit, I want to be chosen. Who doesn't, right? I don't want to be left out. I don't want to be labeled a dark spirit.
Well, how do you know you weren't in the 144? Is it because he didn't recruit you?
So it's an interesting question. Okay.
And there's your book, and
There's the picture of
you two together in his book.
So you maybe have Scott.
This was at the spring football game at the University of Utah. They allowed us to sell my book. I was peddling my wares at the spring football game.
Did you sell a few copies?
A few. I didn't really. I really didn't. If I was really in my mind, I'm really serious about writing a book and publishing it, I would have gone to someone like Deseret Book just right off the bat. It really wasn't the main focus was just writing it. I wasn't trying to sell it, promote it. I really didn't have a strategy or plan or anything with it. I'd do it completely different if I was going to do it again.
But I do. Let's go for full circle again. We already touched on this, but I do have issues. It's intriguing to me because your book is really good. It's really interesting. It's really compelling. Your story is fascinating. And after this could have been, I guess what I'm saying is this could have been Chad Daybell's moment, right? Like if he was smart, he'd be like, hey, this is something I should really promote, really get out there. And instead he says to you, hey, peace out. I'm moving to Idaho. Oh, and now I'm going to write my own autobiography. And it just seems like he sort of you guys had Costco. You had books at Costco. That's like pretty good. I'm pretty sure Julie Rowe, or maybe I shouldn't say that. Let's hope Julie Rowe was never at Costco. But I'm just trying to process this in my brain, what he was thinking, because it feels like Chad Daybell lost an opportunity there.
Well, yeah, because I was excited about what was happening and where it was going, and it's so out of the blue. There was not a hint of, hey, I just want you to be aware of, I'm considering moving, or it was just, literally I got a phone call and it was over. That was it. It was just done. And I was disappointed in that because that's not how he portrayed things to be. That's not what we had agreed to. And I was hoping that, he would be able to do more. I want to go back to something John said in relation to this about, well, how do you know you weren't part of the 144,000? And we spent a lot of time in my house, and he made mention that he wrote a book about his time in the cemetery. And I was like, well, tell me about it. This is fascinating to me. I'd love to hear about this. And he would never share any of it. Never share anything about the books he had written. Never shared anything about the conversations, the thoughts that he had. Nothing. And that stuff was going on. That's what I found out later. Like him moving to Idaho was the culmination of a lot of years of having a very alternative LDS perspective. And because I was like, why didn't you say anything to me? Because you didn't say a word to me about any of this. And I believe he didn't, because he knew how I would respond. Like, I really believe he's like, yeah, I don't have the confidence to tell Scott about what I'm doing because he'll call BS on me. Because, and I think that's why I was, why he never shared any of it. And there was time, think about spending hours in someone's house. Like, you can at least tell me about your cemetery book, and he goes, oh, it's quite fascinating. And I'm like, well, what's fascinating? Tell me about it. I'm here telling you my life.
Yeah.
Did you just do a Chad Daybell impersonation? That was pretty good.
Did I?
I think you kind of did.
If you actually, I have a really good friend that does a really good one. Well, Scott, I'm just kind of, I don't think you should do that right now. Just, what are people going to think about it? I didn't just do that.
See that's exactly why he didn't talk to you about it.
Yeah.
Because he
Right.
didn't feel confident enough to talk to you. But that doesn't preclude you from being on the 144,000.
Yeah. Maybe that file got deleted. I don't know. I have no
Yeah.
idea.
I think if you were, he probably would have reached out to you and recruited you.
Yeah. He did say, because I asked him about Idaho, I go, well, why are you moving to Idaho? Seriously, why are you going to Idaho?
Yeah.
What's it? I mean, no offense to Idaho, but it didn't, and it was Rexburg. It was like, is there a job up there? Is there, I would think there'd be more publishing opportunities in a bigger metropolitan area. Why are you going? And he goes, I just want a simpler life. He goes, I'm going to go live by my brother on the river. He goes, you should come up here. You move up here.
So we did try to recruit you.
He did.
Yeah, for a moment. The book, by the way, that you're referring to is called One Foot in the Grave, and it talks about his job as a cemetery sexton. And there's actually, so in your book, you talk about a meeting with a guidance counselor was it in high school or was it early high school?
12.
I was in the 6th grade.
6th grade? You were 6th
About
grade?
my career orientation week, yes.
6th grade. All right. So in 6th grade, your school was already determined to figure out your career path.
Right.
Okay. So yeah, I didn't remember how old you were, but you took some tests. And
Yes.
you did some interviews.
We reviewed the test with a counselor at the end of the week to determine a career path. And
Right.
he goes, your tests indicate that you're most likely to be a garbage man or a mortician.
Right.
And I'm 12. Like, could you, like, this is my career. Like, this is what I have to look forward to.
This is when you want to be a fireman or a
Or-
policeman.
Or,
When you're
a doctor, or a lawyer,
yeah.
or, something exciting, but
But
garbage man?
The most interesting, so this is the part that interested me when I read that, is that now we're starting to get a little bit of an intersection with Chad Daybell, the cemetery sexton. So a mortician is not exactly a cemetery sexton, but pretty close, right? Like the irony of that really stood out to me.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about it now, that you were supposedly, according to your 6th grade guidance counselor, supposed to be a mortician, and then you had some version of a mortician help you with your book. And then here we are talking about a situation where a near mortician committed these horrible crimes. I mean, I thought that was the chances of these tests finding you to be a mortician are really unlikely.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I also like a janitor is also not a garbage man, but I love that there was a janitor that was your guardian angel too. I recognize that.
Well, so how I've come to terms with all that through my life, just my personally, is everyone's always going to have garbage and everyone's dying. So you're always going to have work. You're always going to be employed, So, as a kid, horrible, but as an adult, you go, it's not a really, if you can get over the people are dead and that garbage stinks, maybe it's a good thing to do. But so Chad, when he was a sexton, my dad had passed away. My parents lived in Arizona at the time, and we transported my dad back to Utah.
Oh yeah, you told
And he
me
was
this, right?
buried in the cemetery.
Okay.
And there's a city rate if you're a citizen, and then there's even though they had this plot for years, and
Your family did.
my family did.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I called Chad because they were going to give us the out of town rate. And I'm like, Chad, he's like, nope, this is what the rate is. And I'm like, wow, some friend you are, and I'm like,
What?
here's the,
He didn't even give you the friend discount?
didn't even give me, and this is in a really, tender moment of my life. He's just like, sorry, dude, you're going to pay the out of town price. My dad, who lived in Springville for years, and I actually lived in Mapleton at the time. So I didn't have a residence in Springville. And so he's like, yeah.
No can do.
Sorry.
Well, a lot of his, if it makes you feel better, did you end up reading that book? Because a lot of the stories he shares in it are pretty cold, and he doesn't seem to have any self-awareness that they are. He shares that there's a weeping mother who comes each night to read a book to her deceased child, and she cries and does a story time at her child's grave. And then the father comes because Chad had fixed the street light, according to Chad, so it didn't shine down where the mother could actually read the book. And so the husband of this mourning mother came and said, "Could you put that street lamp back down?" And he looked at him and said, "No." And he said the man walked away humiliated and embarrassed, and Chad couldn't believe that he would request such a thing. I mean, there are many of those stories that show a lack of empathy and a lack of self-awareness and not connecting to just being human and helping people.
Yeah, and I didn't know you were going to tell that story about your dad and Chad Daybell, and so I think it's really important because it does show the lack of empathy, right? Like if we're trying to put all these little pieces together, this is another one.
Another example. Yeah. And I didn't read the book. I just have one, like it's a folklore in Springville story about the cemetery that scared you to death. And it was about a young man who had passed away. And if you went to his grave and flashed the lights would turn on. And that was just a story. That's the only thing I remember about growing up with that.
That wasn't in his book, but he does talk about people that had not yet gone. Eddie, he referred to a man named Eddie who hadn't gone to the spirit world and was in limbo and had been for years. And then finally Chad said, "Eddie, go home." And Chad took care of it. After all those years, it took Chad to let Eddie know he was good to go. And then Eddie listened. So anyway, wow. I'm so sorry that happened.
It's interesting how that cemetery, because both my parents are there, my grandparents, and now my aunt and uncle. And I find a lot of peace going there. And I don't see people, I don't talk to people, I don't see any of that. But I certainly find, a great measure of peace visiting. I leave flowers for my parents and grandparents, and it's a very meaningful thing for me to do. So the cemetery to me has actually been a rather, soulful place, cathartic place. Just it's been a place of peace, really.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful cemetery too.
I'm curious, you said that there's been several times where you thought about reaching out to Chad. You almost knocked on his door when the children were missing and, tried to find out what was going on. What would you say to him today? Like today, if he could hear you?
Okay. So I've had this, battle going on because there's a part of me that says, okay, if I'm a follower of Christ, that it's not up to me to judge people. Christ invites us to visit and to love our enemies and to visit those who are afflicted and those that are in prison and those who are, regardless of what's happened. So there's been a side of me that said, maybe I should do that. And reach out just from the sake of, regardless, and all these things you've done that I think are deplorable and horrible. And I cannot for the life of me make any sense of it. And if you were my son, I don't know how I would be. I would probably still love my son, but say, you got to own up to this. And I think that's the thing. It's probably the one thing I just say, for your eternal soul, so you can have some measure of peace and really, I think out of respect for all of these people and the lives you've just utterly crushed and destroyed, that you need to own up to this, and you need to be honest about it. And you need to just say, I did it. It was wrong. I can't take it back. I'm sorry. And I'll spend the rest of whatever I have in some measure of making amends and making it right. I don't know how you could even do that, but that's what I'd say. You know, look, the charade's up. You gotta come clean, just for the sake of everyone, and for yourself as well.
Do you think it would work?
No, because I think he's when I talked about, you know, he lost the line between truth and fantasy, and his fantasy became reality, and so he just lost in whatever fantasy that he's, you know, perpetrated and deceived people with. And I don't think he knows what. I don't think he thinks he's wrong. Because I think that whole thing about being at BYU and being nothing.
Yeah.
And I think if he ever came back to reality, I think it would be too much to realize, especially now. Like, not only am I nothing, but look at all the things that I've destroyed because I am nothing. I think that would just be too much to bear. So it's easier to just, you know, think that I'm something.
Yeah. It's a tough one. See, the one question we get all the time, and I think you're approaching it here with your answers, is people asking us, do you guys think that Chad Daybell really believes this stuff? Does Chad Daybell really believe that they're zombies that need to be extinguished? Right? Like, what's your take on that?
Stories in the Bible, and if you're LDS, stories in the Book of Mormon are, they're out there. Some of them. I mean, it's you know, some of the, you know, Abraham, who all of, you know, humanity was going to go through Abraham. He was this choice person in the beginning of the Bible, and God said, you need to kill your son. Like, to hear that as a human, you go, that kind of goes against conventional wisdom. And Abraham was right at the point of doing it. Now, there's a lot of symbolism behind that, and symbolizing that, you know, me as God gave up my son. I sacrificed my son for all of us. So there's some, you know, symbolism in that. Okay, if Abraham, you're going to have the seed of the world go through you, you have to understand what it's like to give up and sacrifice this son that took forever to get. And it was a miracle to begin with. And Abraham said, I'm willing to do that. And then so the stories, you know, there's a story in the Book of Mormon about, you know, Nephi slaying Laban, and commanded by an angel of God to do that. And so there's a lot of, you know, David slew Goliath. I mean, there's so you can take stories that I think are beautiful and powerful and very meaningful and deep and rich in the scriptures, and I think you can turn them and distort them into, you know, I have a, you know, I'm doing it in the name of God. I'm doing it in the name of righteousness. You know, you could argue with jihad, you know, this holy war, and, you know, the infidels who have defiled our country or defiled our God, that, you know, kill them all. That whole thing is done in the name of God. And I think when you can distort it in your brain to be from higher source or from God, then it makes it okay and it makes it right. And I think that's where Chad went with this. I have the ability to determine who's good and who's bad. I've been given this special ability to do it. And these people are already dead anyways. And so I think he can take, I just think religion, and I'm a believer, and I'm not, and I never questioned or wavered in my belief or testimony of what I know. And I'm not dissuaded by it because of Chad Daybell or any of these things that happen. But I can see how people can use what is good and right and turn it and twist it to fit their narrative. And whether it's sneaky or conniving or manipulative, or maybe they have mental health issues, or I don't know, but there certainly is the ability, and you've seen it with a lot of people. I mean, and not just people that have gone off the rails who were from the LDS faith. I mean, there have been other, rather terrible tragedies in the name of religion.
So, so you see him as a believer, true believer?
No, a true believer of
a true believer of his distorted.
Oh, I think he's a believer of what he's created, but certainly,
yeah.
I just don't think God put us here to do what he did.
Right.
It's not the faith it's
no.
You believe that he is a believer in Chad Daybell's belief system that he distorted.
Yeah, 100%. It's, I think he took something that's good and he twisted it in a way to fit his narrative. He altered what is true and right and made it his own.
Right, to fit his own needs.
You've come a long way, Scott, just to sit here at our table. And again, I want to go back to this point that you said, there isn't a day that goes by that I don't think about what Chad Daybell did. And and I think, right, just knowing that someone that did the most egregious, most horrendous, how did we get here? Is there anything that you want to talk about yourself or ask John or share while you're here that we haven't yet? Or did we cover it all?
I really can't think of anything. I really can't. The things that are on my mind or the things I've thought about, or how did he get to where he was, and just I really don't.
Something else I want to say too, because as a true crime podcast, you've listened to us, sort of the angle we take, and the angle John takes is John's entire career is to try to understand the mind of a criminal and how he got here. And people always say in every episode, but people live difficult lives and they don't become a criminal, right? Like that's a theme, and that's true. And so I just also want to point out, in your book, you share about some really difficult things in your childhood. And I think one thing for me that I recognize while reading these two books, I mean, it's wild to have both these books in my hand at the same time, knowing Chad Daybell was a part of both of them. One, his autobiography, your memoir, same publisher, Chad Daybell been involved in both. You two started out in the same place, and just how different your lives went. And I guess it also goes to what you say you think about all the time, that you're free and he isn't. And I just think that's like a good, thing to point out too, that how different lives can go. And I don't, it's something that I want to I guess it's something we kind of explore on Hidden True Crime. And I don't understand it. I don't understand how some people can go such a different direction. But
I think the huge difference between those two books is that in Scott's book, there's this real desire to understand and to know. And the one question you keep asking is, how can I get better? How can I realize my potential? What do I have to do on this journey? Right? That's a question. Those are questions Chad Daybell never asks. Chad Daybell, in his book, there's always an underlying presumption that he's got the answers. Right? And so that if you read these two books, they're night and day in the sense that, you know, for you, Scott, and I presume this is still true, but there's this, you use the term journey in your book. There's this constant search for ways to improve your life or ways to understand elements of your life at a different level. There's this openness to learning, and that does not exist in Chad Daybell's book.
So Chad and I came from very similar backgrounds as far as grew up in a 2-parent home, grew up in a small community, in the same community.
Right.
Went to school, basically had the same experience with the same religion. And Chad went on an LDS mission. I didn't go on a mission. At least, like, I spent a lot of time as a missionary, as a professional athlete, and served as a missionary for my church there, and still do today. And I think, you know, for me, to your answer, your kind of assessment of things, Christ asks us to come to him with a broken heart and a contrite spirit. And that's it. And so having that humility and coming to him with that kind of approach allows you to be open to be taught and to be molded and to be and to learn and to become more like Christ. And if you don't have that, if you don't have that humility, I mean, I'm just speaking about, this has been my experience. And you know, there is this, you know, what I've learned as I've gotten older is that things hit me differently now. So there's constantly this evolution of how I think, or and I kind of equate it to the sun. Like, we need the sun to exist, and the sun comes up in the morning, and the rays that we get from the sun hit us. That's the morning light. You have the directs, and then you have the evening light. But then the sun moves every day, so we get a different. So it takes us an entire year of having the sun, and we can't just sit out in the sun and like get it all at once, right? Because we just burn. And so there's this kind of process of just getting little deposits in your bank every day of just light and the rays of sun that just kind of enlighten us and teach us, and to really grasp that, you need the patience and the humility and the recognition of what's actually happening. And I think someone who has all the answers goes, I'm going to go out into the sun. I'm going to stay there. It's all going to hit me at once, and I'm going to get it all right now, and I'm going to have it all right now. And that person burns and withers and dies, and is never really nourished and grown completely. And so for me, I've just tried to be patient and get those little rays of sunshine as I could.
In the chapter, let me get the chapter here. Chapter 23, joy comes through sorrow. You talk about something similar. This is the title of this particular passage is Opening My Heart. And so this was a passage that really stood out. There were a couple of them here, but this one I want to read in particular. Quote, in unraveling my life and emotions, it all really boiled down to one thing. Which, by the way, when somebody gets to the point in a book where they say it's down to one thing, I'm like, I'm paying attention. So here we have the one thing in Scott Mitchell's book. I love this. I wanted to go back to my childhood home that we lost when I was growing up. I wanted to find that home again, that feeling, that love, and that acceptance. That's all I wanted to find. That, I mean, you know, it's a beautiful moment in your book. Have you found
So,
it?
um, so this home that you're referring to, my parents bought it in 1971 for $10,000. It was an originally Adobe home built, pioneer era, when the pioneers came to Utah, and probably the late, I don't know, 1850s is probably when it was built originally. And then it was added to, and it was a fixer upper. And we spent years. And once it was completely, and as a kid, that's what I did. I helped our family remodel this home and build it. And it was beautiful. And it was really the time in my life with my parents, my siblings, my extended family, because I come from a big family. My dad's the oldest of 8. So we spent a lot of time with family. And those were the happiest times, growing up. And I don't think I realized that that's what I was looking for until later. I just felt that there was this thing that I want to get back to, and it was Christmas was the best time of year. It was there were just all these moments that were just so wonderful in that house. And my parents lost it through a business and a decision, and I was the only one at home. My older sisters had all graduated, so I was the only one left at home at this time. And so and I just remember literally just being torn from the home that, it wasn't just my childhood. It was a home that I helped to build and to make really special. And after that, my parents never had a home that they owned. They rented apartments, houses, condos, and really the house they lived in Arizona when my dad died was a house that I owned that they lived in.
Yeah.
So, what it really boils down to, that feeling is love, and it's really, for me, it's having the greatest desire that I have in my life is to have the love of God, to feel his love. And that's really what it boils down to. And it's really feeling that inner joy and peace of knowing that you're right with God, that that you feel that love from him. And yeah, I have absolutely found that in my life, and really found that I wasn't really far from it to begin with, but realizing that to me was the essence of, and it wasn't the house. It wasn't going, well, if I had a house that was like that one, I had even visions of buying the house back at one point. And actually, when I moved back to Springville, I asked the people that owned it if I could tour it, and it was, they'd actually made it better than when we had it. But it was still pretty much the same house. But for me, it was and is. It's a inner. It's an inner peace. It's not a place. And it's really that peace with myself. And because I talk about this joy and how I played professional football for 12 years, but I didn't win a Super Bowl. I'm not in the Hall of Fame. My career was pretty good. It wasn't like top shelf. Not going to be remembered as one of the all-time great quarterbacks in the NFL. And for so long, I felt like I failed. I've been married before and divorced. And that was really hard on me. I've had business opportunities that have been unsuccessful. And so there, and what I really realized was some of the greatest failures I've had have helped me identify who I really am and what I've developed as a person. And so that joy, or that coming home for me, was realizing that I have a lot of resilience. I have a lot of determination. I have a lot of patience and forgiveness and tolerance, and these things, these characteristics that I didn't recognize that I had developed until I went through these hard times. And I really found that in myself, like who I was, and I liked that person. And so that to me is coming home.
When you started The Biggest Loser, you talk about working a little bit or meeting with the psychologist that was part of the show, I guess. And one of the things, I was trying to find the passage. I have it marked somewhere, but I'm not finding it. But
I'll find it because I read it last night. You keep talking, but
and one of the themes of your book is how competitive you are and how winning is everything, right? And how you've got to be the best. You talk about this numerous times in your book about you got to win the Heisman, you've got to win a Super Bowl, you've got to be in the Hall of Fame, right? It's these really high standards and aspirations. And you go to The Biggest Loser, and the psychologist, which I really appreciate, by the way, he basically asks you the question, why is winning so important to you? Right? And you're kind of taken a little bit aback by that. Do you want to talk about that element of your life for a minute?
So it's exhausting, actually. This like, so when I get in the car and I have to go to my studio from my house, the minute I get in the car, I'm figuring out what is the absolute most optimum, best way, fastest way that I get to my destination. And so my brain just goes in overdrive. And
so even this week.
It's all the time. So if I drive, I'm playing Tetris.
Okay.
If my wife drives, we're having a conversation. And it's so literally, and it's hard, and it's exhausting to have to keep it just doesn't go away. It doesn't turn off. I don't even know how to turn it off. I've learned how to turn it, to kind of, okay, it's okay to just, have a conversation while you're actually driving. But it's certainly been a blessing. Like it's taken me to a lot of good places, but it's also been a curse. Sometimes it's just, like I said, I just want to get in the car and drive, and I can't, and I just can't.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm a reckless driver. It's not even like I'm a fast driver. I'm just like, I'm an efficient driver. And sometimes being efficient, I drive fast. Sometimes being efficient, I move 2 or 3 lanes over and pass people all the way from the right. And sometimes I have a very loud verbal conversation about how stupid some of the drivers are and how they just absolutely, just move over, please. And really, I almost want to say at this point, it's probably the one thing that really drives me bananas. Is just, and I'm really okay with pretty much everything else. Football was really hard for me to watch for a long time. And now I'm just, I'm 56 years old, and if I wanted to play tomorrow, I couldn't anyway. So I just don't worry about it anymore. It's just kind of, from time to time, things will come up that, drive me crazy. But like, like Barry Sanders complaining about not, it really bothered me.
Yeah.
I can't say with that I've made any peace with it completely. And I don't know if that's a good or bad thing at this point.
Yeah, in the book you actually say, so he asks you this question, and you have the realization that you tied a lot of your self-worth to winning, and you tied this, the idea of obtaining love.
Yeah, and it was really on the show. I realized, the question I think was about, where do you find joy? Like, did you find joy in anything? And at the time I was like, no, like, unless I win. And it was also the mindset of everyone.
Yeah.
Like, unless you win a Super Bowl, it's not a successful season. Like, we're here to win. If we don't win, we don't have a job. If we don't win, you're not, it's kind of a warped world in some regards, because one team every year wins. So yeah, it's a tough thing, but what it really forced me to do was to look at my life and realize how wonderful my life actually was.
Yeah.
And how there were really and are just tons of things that actually bring me joy, that I can really find a lot of happiness through.
So I think maybe I want to end with this passage, but which brings me to my other favorite passage. And so we've kind of been talking about this, but I want to just read what you said back in 2014, 2015, when this was being written. And I think it's quite profound, and just kind of get your thoughts about it now. But so this is on page 204. Quote, "What I was missing was that it's not about the destination. It's about being. It's about being a human being. It's about the experience. It's about finding those moments of joy every single day."
Yeah. It was a very powerful change in the way I viewed things when I came to that realization. And it actually came to me, like, as I was lying in bed on The Biggest Loser one morning, just how all of these moments that I saw were the failures were actually, that's where the success came. That's where I really found who I was when I failed, and when I didn't win. And realizing that if you're just so caught up in the end, you don't capture what you've experienced on your way there. And that's what I recognize. Like, wow, I've realized I've become all these different things. I found all these things about myself that I didn't know I was even capable of, and they were things I like. And it was shocking to me when I realized that, and how I could actually verbalize what really mattered to me, what I valued. And it was just simple as things like, I like to solve puzzles. I like to figure things out. I like to build things. There were just things like that. Like, that really brings a lot of joy to me. And being married, just that I believe deeply in that, and having a wonderful relationship. And I do. My children, like, it's just the joy I find in just being a part of their lives, not trying to make their life into anything, but just being there in their lives, and living their lives with them, and supporting them, and showing them how valuable and how much I love my children. I wrote all of this out. I don't think I wrote all of it. I may have in the book, but in a journal I wrote it all out. It's pages of just, but if I wasn't forced really to lose.
Yeah.
And had I just won, I never would have slowed down enough to go, wow, look at all these wonderful things that you've found along the way here that are priceless.